So welcome to our meeting today. Let's talk about the tasks that we have at hand. Actually, let me show you what we have already for Spaceship Simulator. As I'm pulling it up, if anybody has any questions they want to kick us off with, feel free to just shout those out. Okay. I'm just going to share my screen really quick. So this is the Thorium Nova screen. It's currently being written in TypeScript. It has a Node.js backend and a React frontend. It has a data layer that I wrote myself. So that's going to be hopefully convenient and helpful when it comes to development. Hopefully not a super huge pain in the butt and super buggy. Let's see. And we've got credits over here, which as soon as you add contributions, you should get credits put here because I want everybody to get credit for the wonderful things that they do. We've got the how-to guides, which hopefully will be helpful when it comes to development. I've tried to outline and explain as much as I can about how all of the different pieces work. But if there's anything missing here that you feel could be explained a little bit more or explained at all, feel free to let me know and I can write up a little thing about that. And then we've got the configure plugins, which is where you can configure the plugins. This is how everything in Thorium is configured. It's all plugin based. So you can share plugins, you can export and distribute plugins. Hopefully there's going to be a plugin repository where people can share, like upload their plugins and then other people can download them. But there's one plugin that ships with Thorium by default, which includes, eventually it'll include all of these different things. Right now, it just includes configurations for ships and for themes. The theme is the appearance of the frame. So using CSS, anybody will be able to make their own theme for that to make the station look however they want. And we'll have some themes that ship with Thorium Nova. But for right now, that's that. And then we have the ship config, which is where you can configure the individual ships which people interact with. So some of these are going to be player ships, some of them are going to be NPCs, but you can set up the physics, you can set up the assets, the ship systems like the warp engines, impulse engines, weapons, all of that stuff that are available on the particular ship. In order to play Thorium, you have to start a flight. And when you start the flight, you choose the number of crew that you're going to have on the flight. I know this says 6 crew. There's actually only a set of stations available for 1 crew, like that. There we go. But eventually you'll be able to choose the number of crew members that you want to have on your ship. And it will have different stations for each of them. And it will automatically assign the correct screens that those stations have based on the roles for each of those stations. So on a 6-person ship, you'd have a captain, a sensors, operations and communications, tactical, engineering, and flight control. And it would be more for an 8-person ship or a 12-person ship. Once you get to the 6 to 12-person ship range, then you start having positions dealing with people on the inside of the ship, like I was mentioning before with the Marauders map. So you'd have a security officer, a medical damage control officers, all of that. So once you pick your crew, then you pick which ship you want to fly on for this particular mission. You pick the mission that you want to run. The mission is the storyline, which is mostly a sequence of events that happen. And we've had conversations about that on GitHub. So lots of stuff to talk about there. It hasn't been written up formally yet, but that'll happen eventually someday. And then you start the flight. And then from here, you can assign the different clients. So each client is a computer connected to Thorium Nova. This one is called No More Lakes. And if I wanted to, I could click this to change it. And we can assign this client to one of these stations by clicking the assign button. And as soon as I click the assign button, then it will take me to that station. The way that Thorium Nova works is this is running in an Electron window, which is just a framework for embedding web apps in as desktop apps. But this is also running an HTTP server, so I can access localhost 4444, I think it is. HTTPS, that. And I have to type in the magic incantation in order to get by it. Someday, I hope to figure out how to get around that. Being able to access this over HTTPS gives you a lot of extra powers, like being able to access the camera and microphone and do other fancy stuff. But setting up HTTPS to run over a local area network is difficult and complicated. So anyway, here's this other client that's called Fire Gamble, and I will just assign it to the pilot. And then it takes us to the actual station where I can log in with my name. And this is the pilot screen. Yay. It has a whole bunch of just data because I haven't actually made the screen. So we don't have any actual screens yet. Well, there is one screen. If you come up to, oh, it's not here. I don't know where it is. There should be a button up here for actually testing out these stations, but it's not there. Let me see if I can just go to cards. There, yeah. So I can click on any of the cards. That's the name of the individual screens. That's what I call the individual screens that people can visit on their stations. And each station is assigned a different set of cards. And there is a card for the officer's log, which is probably the most boring and very simple station that I could have made, but it's good for demonstrating that cards actually work.
Can you actually make an entry?
If you really want me to, I will. Hello.
See your work in progress. That's it.
We're learning.
Let's see what happens.
Thorium Nova. And I click the save button. And then the way that you know that it works is if I refresh the screen, my entry still appears here.
Ooh.
Yep.
Very nice.
And
yay, you tested something live and it didn't break horribly.
Yeah. Yes. And that's
putting
the thing.
pressure on, see if the stuff is working. And hey, it is working.
Mike has already played around with this a little bit and submitted a bunch of issues, which is great. That's what I want. Like, even if you don't want to contribute code, just playing around with each of the alphas, finding bugs and reporting them is super helpful, because it helps us find out, helps us make it better, right? So does anybody have any questions at this point?
For me, how do I get this up on my ancient Linux boxes? But that cannot, I don't have to take anyone's time answering that question.
Yeah, let's talk about that really quick. I've only distributed this over the newsletter, but I'm planning on putting it on thoriumnova.com or thoriumsim.com soon. But if you want to get access to the latest, it's all going to be here on the GitHub repository. You could just go to releases. I actually drafted an alpha this morning, but it didn't work because I actually want to check and see why it didn't work. Something with the Mac build. Right here.
So
failed to upload app to Apple's notarization servers. Nice.
All right. So if I go to the GitHub and I go to the releases, I can pick up the Ubuntu release, assuming you get one of the alphas up and running.
Exactly. So you should be able to use app image here, or I think that's it. I think that's the only Linux binary that I have, which hopefully works okay.
All right. I'll let you know.
Probably the easiest, well, and eventually I'm planning on making it so that there's just a node executable, which you can run, which either has node, well, yeah, it'll be bundled somehow to make it really easy.
So if I grab the app image and I run it, am I running the server, the client, or both, or yes, or I decide whenever it launches?
All together. Yep.
Okay.
So this right here is both the server and the client. It starts up a server when you launch it. And anybody can access that server using the port, which I need to put the port somewhere on here so you can actually tell what the port is. And then if you use this to join another server that's open because you want to use this as a kiosk, which gives you a couple of extra features that you don't have out of a web browser, then it shuts down your local server and accesses the other server. And then as soon as you're done accessing that server, it starts up the
So
local server again.
I have a plethora of Linux boxes here, so I could start up a server on one Linux box and go to the other Linux box and start up a client and have it connect to the server.
Yep. The join a server button isn't working yet.
Okay.
But you could connect with a Chrome or any
I
web
can connect
browser.
with the browser. Okay.
Yep. And the default port is 4444.
You sure you're not stuttering?
That's 4 4s.
Okay.
That's very intentional, I assure you. Okay, so what needs to be done at this point? I mean, anything we want, really. I've been soliciting for ideas for a little while. At this point, what we have is here in the issues list. So basically anything here, especially anything with an approved label, but and some things have dependencies on other things, like creating the editor palette for the star map kind of depends on creating these views in the first place. So we have to do things in a certain order, but we basically have the star map, which is everything related to stars, planets, interstellar objects, that kind of thing, and being able to edit that. And then we have the ship map, which is everything that happens inside of a ship. And you can see if you go to the ship map editor here, that's kind of like the overarching issue. And then the star map editor is the overarching issue for that. And we've got all of the tasks here. And then it has the GitHub discussion listed here, which explains kind of how it all works. So that's the best place to start, is to say, okay, let's see how the whole thing works together. And then we can start implementing each of these individual tasks. Same thing with the star map editor, which is significantly longer in its list of things that need to be done. But it also has, and significantly shorter when it comes to the description for those things. The good news about the star map especially is I've already done a lot of this work before when I was working on Thorium Nova last year, before I rebooted it. And you can get to all of that code in the old branch that has all of that old code. So a lot of these things we can just pull out of there or use it as inspiration. Okay. Now, I'm going to level with you. I've never organized a project like this before. I've never organized people, random volunteers. Not that you're all random people. You're wonderful people. We already established that. But I don't know what I'm doing. So at this point, let me first ask, does anybody have any questions?
I won't say I don't have questions, but I'm not sure that any of them are quite applicable at this time. Or maybe the response here is, I don't know what questions I want to ask yet.
Perfect. Then I will ask a question. I'm assuming that all of you are here because you want to contribute to Thorium Nova in some way, particularly through software development.
Valid assumption.
Yes.
Yes. Which is awesome. And I want to help you be successful as much as possible, which is why I have the guides, which hopefully are comprehensive. Oh no, I shut it down. Okay. Hopefully the guides are comprehensive. Hopefully the code is clear. And if there's anything I can do in that way, I absolutely will. So my question for you is, how can I help you get started? And how can I help you be successful in contributing to this project? Before I have you answer that, I do want to make sure one more thing is clear. This is a community project. There is zero expectation for anyone participating. Nobody has to do anything here. We're not going to kick you out. We're not going to be upset if you don't do something. If you say that you'll do something, then we kind of hope that you'll do it. But eventually we'd be like, okay, they're not going to do it. Let's have somebody else do it. And there will be no hard feelings, because I recognize that all of you have a life. I have a life. It's a good life. I like this life, but I also like spaceship. So that's why we're here. So how can I help you get started? How can I help you be successful?
I have a question. So I haven't really seen any of the old Thorium. So like trying to visualize some of this stuff is a little hard. How
Sure.
similar are you wanting it to look to the old one? Like how things are laid out on the screen, like just from kind of a user interface sort of
Great
perspective.
question. I think that the old one was fine, but I
Okay.
kind of threw it together with the intention of going back and making it better in the future. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think that we definitely want to nail the user experience here, though. So there's no reason why we can't make it as good as possible right now. For example, moving around on the star map or moving around on the ship map should be very intuitive. It should be easy to do. Anybody should be able to take their mouse and drag around and do whatever they want without needing an instruction manual, and it should feel good. Just as an example. So to answer your question more directly, we can throw out everything that I've done. We can use it as inspiration. We could implement it verbatim. It doesn't really matter to me. If the easiest way to see those things is to go to the blog on thoriumsim.com, and if you go back a little bit to these updates, we can go to like here, which has this GIF. Or is that just a picture? This is just a picture that shows the card for navigation. So this is where we can see, okay, we've got these solar systems that we can navigate to. We've got a little zoom thing here. We've got a recenter button. We've got an enter system button, which allows us to go in and see the planets inside of that solar system. And we've got a search up here. Great. And that's a good way of seeing kind of how it worked before. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good enough.
Yeah. If you
That'll
want to
suffice
run,
for now.
if you want to run the old, it might be a little bit difficult. I can't remember how easy it is to get that code base up and running. My goal right now is to make it so that the code base is like turnkey. You clone the repo, you run npm install, you run npm start, and boom, you've got it.
Mhm.
But I can't say the same for the old code base. I can't remember what state I left it in.
Okie doke. That's good.
One more thing I'll say on that note. There's no reason we can't do user research. Like the Discord server is kind of dead, I'll admit. But we've got 20 people with the Nova tag, which means they're relatively interested in Nova. We've got 44 people online. I'm sure that if you post a screenshot or a sketch or something of a user experience or a user interface and ask, hey, anybody have any thoughts on this? You'll definitely get some answers. And that's something that I hope we do frequently. I should be doing it more often, but I don't. What other questions can I answer? What can help you, and what can help you get started and be successful with this?
I have a question. So let's say there's like an idea that I see someone else suggested and everyone likes it. And I want to go ahead and try to implement it. What's like the process there to make sure like I'm not stepping on toes, or like how would I get started with that?
I think you'll find that toes are very hard to get stepped on. If you step on somebody else's toes and they're being a jerk about it, there's probably something more going on there. So stepping on toes should be your least concern. I think the intention is we create discussions here. Well, you can start discussions in Discord, just kind of have a casual discussion, get ideas flowing. Then you write up something a little bit more in depth where you can get more comments. And then after a little while, like a week or less, like a couple of days, you can take that discussion, turn it into a GitHub issue. Like what I did is I came here to the star map editor. I clicked the create issue from discussion, which is what brought it in and formatted it the way that it did. And then I just added all of the tasks that I could think of as issues, created new issues for those, And then for the not stepping on people's toes part, you just assign yourself the issue. So if you don't already have the ability to create issues, to assign issues to yourself, then just ask me for access to the GitHub repo. Or if you sign up for a Thorium, if you sign up for a Thorium Sim account on thoriumsim.com and link your GitHub profile, I think it automatically sends you an organization invitation. So that's kind of how we don't step on toes is we, oh, that's not what I wanted to do, is we create the issues and then we assign the issues to ourselves just to say, this is mine, nobody else work on this. If you are working on something and there isn't an issue already created, or there is an issue already created and you're not assigned to it, then you should do everything in your power to get assigned to that issue. Does that answer your question?
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Super. Hey, any other questions? Is there anything else I can do to help you get started and feel successful?
What are kind of the, is there a bit of an order for things? Like what is kind of the most needed things right at this moment? Like what would be a good, if I wanted to start tomorrow on something, not that that's necessarily going to happen, but
I understand.
yeah.
I probably will not start tomorrow either. I am still very sick. So
maybe next week. I don't know. It depends on what else is going on.
well, and that's another thing. I hope, and when it comes to stepping on toes, like I hope that people don't feel bad if I grab a bunch of these tasks and just kind of rush through them. And it like maybe you wanted to do some of them, which if you do, then let me know as soon as possible because I want to jump on these as soon as possible. These are what I consider to be the most crucially needed features at this point. There are other features that are not necessarily as crucially needed. Well, let me take a step back. A lot of features depend on these features, like the star map. In order to have the main view screen, you have to have the star map. In order to have any kind of ship movement, you have to have the star map. In order to, I mean, you could probably start with some of the weaponry stuff, but we haven't talked about weapons at all. So we need to first start a discussion to talk about how we want weapons to work and then create all the issues. And then we can start working on that. A flight director screen is something that could be started right now, but it's not, in my mind, it's not something that needed to be started right away. But that's a screen which allows a flight director outside of the crew to be able to manipulate and control things in the ship and as part of the simulation. And the missions system, we've talked about it a lot, but we haven't, like, there's no issues to get started on that. Between the star map and the ship map, those are the most foundational pieces, though. So that's why those are the ones that I'm starting with. In my mind, I could be mistaken. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that works great. Yeah, because just looking through the issues, I'm like, oh my God, there's so many. Like, where do we start? And then the other one.
Let me time out for just a second.
Yeah.
Start with the star map editor and the task at the very top of that, and then work your way down from there. Okay. That's the one problem with the issues list here is I created all of these issues, but they depend on each other. So some of the issues aren't ready for work yet.
Okay.
And then there are others that don't have the star map or ship map, like these ones here that you could pick up if you felt like you could do that. Go back to your other question, if you wouldn't mind. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, that's fine. Then the other one, I guess, like I am not super experienced with web development. I've dabbled here and there, but this is definitely a much larger project. And I guess for the first couple things that I do, I'm probably gonna want to bounce a lot of ideas off of somebody who's worked more with these systems. Is the Discord kind of the place to go for that?
Absolutely. The
Great.
development channel in Discord is exactly what that's for.
Okay.
Same if you have feature ideas. If there's something that you're like, I kind of want to do this just because it's fun, just mention it in Discord, and I or somebody else, but most likely me, because I know kind of the constraints and everything, can tell you where to get started or whether there's something else that needs to be done before you can work on that kind of thing. But ideas are free and welcome. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thanks for writing your little intros, by the way. It's really nice, like, getting to know you in this way. I'm sorry that I couldn't have you like introduce yourself in person, but we only have like 7 minutes left in the Zoom call, and I want to make sure that we talk about everything else that we want to talk about. And that's the thing. I would love to like do a tour of the code base at some point. I suppose I could do a quick tour of the code base if that would be helpful for folks right now, but I definitely don't have to if it would be like super boring.
That could be useful.
Okay, 5-minute tour of the code base. Let's do it. Code base is split into 3 big pieces and then a couple of smaller pieces. We have the client, which is a React app that uses the Vite build tool, which is really fast for building. It's kind of like Webpack, but much faster. And it's organized into folders where we've got pages for different pages that you'll be seeing. We've got cards, which is the individual screens that show up on stations. We've got components, which are just individual components that are used throughout, including UI components, which are reusable components that you can use throughout. The client uses Tailwind CSS and a package called Daisy UI to do the styling. And the reason I did it that way is to make it so that the styles can easily be overridden with CSS for theming purposes. I doubt many folks will be doing much in the desktop folder, but this is where we have the Electron app. Here, I can bump up the size of this. I'm sorry. So this is where we have the Electron app with a number of things, including starting the Thorium server, loading URLs, Bonjour for automatic discovery of Thorium servers, that kind of thing.
You're showing
And
us
then we
.ts files. Can you actually open one up so we can see what the TypeScript looks like? Because I see
Yeah, sure.
index.html and that's not TypeScript.
No, yeah, index.html. Where did you see that? You saw that in the client here.
Well,
Yeah,
I
it's
saw
just-
it in the window. Yeah, that window.
Yeah, it's just an HTML file. It's loading this TSX file here in source. And yeah, we use TypeScript. So I think TypeScript is configured to allow JavaScript.
All right, so
If not-
I'll ask, I see an extension .tsx and I see an extension .ts. What's the difference?
Yeah, .ts is used for just regular TypeScript files. TSX is used for JSX code that is written into TypeScript. So TypeScript, so this right here, let me go to one that's a little more obvious. This right here is a JavaScript file, but it looks like it has HTML in it. That's because React uses this extension of JavaScript called JSX, which lets you write this HTML-like syntax, and a build tool compiles it into function calls. So this right here compiles into a function that calls this, which is a function that calls this, which has a string as its argument. And React uses that in order to render the page dynamically and reactively. TypeScript does not allow, by default, TypeScript doesn't work with Java or JSX syntax. It gets confused by it. And so to tell TypeScript that we are using JSX syntax, we have to use the .tsx extension.
I see.
Just a little convention. But you'll notice here, I don't have any JSX and I still use .tsx. It's not going to hurt anything if you just use TSX for everything. But you'll notice in other places, I do have .ts for just TypeScript. The final main section is the server, which is, again, a Node.js server that runs a HTTP server for all of the clients to connect to. It handles the database, which is stored entirely in memory and is persisted to the file system on a throttled interval. So that makes it so it doesn't thrash your file system. But the fact that the database is in memory means it's real fast. And I don't imagine the database is ever going to get larger than a couple of megabytes. So we don't have to worry about overloading memory. If we do, then we'll figure something else out.
Are your 3D models in the database?
The 3D models are part of the plugins. So that the plugins are stored in during development. They're in the data plugins. And then we've got the Thorium default plugin here. And if I go to my ship, I've got my Astra frigate ship here. I've got the manifest.yaml, which has all of the data for the ship. So the idea is plugins can be manually written since they're just YAML files. If you follow the correct specification, then you can write this completely by hand. And then
So
the assets are stored next to it. And I've got the model right here. The 3D model is this model.glb file.
Your database does not have the model itself. It just has references to the model, and the models are like in the plugins.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which is why you can get away with the database in memory.
Exactly. And you'll notice that all of the files here in the data folder, all the folders are grayed out. That means that they are not checked into Git. So the idea is these are just for your local computer, for your development. We don't check them into Git and share our flight data with everybody else. One exception is this Thorium default folder actually is a Git submodule. It's its own Git repository. So you can see that it's in the Thorium Nova plugin repository in the Thorium sim repo. And that makes it so that we can work together on this default plugin, which is the plugin that's going to be distributed with Thorium Nova when it's bundled as its own Electron app.
So if someone were to be enthusiastic about start developing things and
Sorry, I need to time you out for just a second because we have less than a minute left.
Okay.
We can continue this conversation by just jumping into the same Zoom room as soon as it kicks us out. So anybody that wants to go, feel free.